The morning sun peeked through the curtains as Zoe Carter stared at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her navy blue sweater for the 5th time. Her dark brown eyes, filled with a mix of hope and worry, looked back at her. Today was her first day at Westlake High, and everything had to be perfect. Not that it would make things easier. Being the new kid mid-semester was hard enough, but being one of the few black students at a mostly white school added another layer of pressure she was all too familiar with. "You got this," she whispered to herself, tucking a braided strand of hair behind her ear. Her mom had spent hours helping her style it yesterday, their way of building up armor for what might come. Downstairs, the smell of pancakes filled the air. Her father, the newly appointed police chief Raymond Carter, sat at the kitchen table reading something on his tablet, still not fully comfortable in his crisp uniform. He looked up when Zoe entered and smiled, though his eyes carried the worry he tried to hide. "Ready for the big day, kiddo?" he asked, setting his coffee down. Zoe nodded, forcing a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." She hadn't told anyone at Westlake about her dad's job. The last thing she wanted was to be known as the police chief's daughter before people knew her as just Zoe. Her mother turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "You eat something proper now. Can't have that brain of yours running on empty." She slid a plate of pancakes across the counter. "And remember what we talked about. Hold my head high, be myself, and don't let anyone dim my light," Zoe finished, the family mantra etched into her heart after years of moves and new schools. Her parents had raised her to be proud and strong, but sometimes, in moments like these, she wished they could just stay put somewhere long enough for that strength to matter less. The drive to school was quiet. Through the window, Zoe watched the neighborhoods change, from their modest rental in the more diverse part of town to the sprawling houses with perfect lawns near Westlake High. Her stomach tightened as they pulled up to the school entrance, a massive brick building with a carefully manicured lawn and groups of students already gathered outside. "Want me to walk you in?" her father asked, his hand hesitating on the gear shift. "Dad, no," Zoe said quickly. "I'm 16, not 6. The last thing she needed was to be seen getting dropped off by a police car. She softened her voice, seeing the hurt flash in his eyes. "But thanks. I'll text you later, okay?" With a deep breath, Zoe stepped out of the car, clutching her backpack strap like a lifeline. The weight of eyes followed her as she walked toward the entrance, some curious, some indifferent, some already judging. She'd felt this before, the silent sizing up that happened when you were different. The main office was bustling with activity. A middle-aged woman with glasses perched on her nose handed Zoe her schedule with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your transcripts are impressive," she said, sounding surprised in a way that made Zoe's skin prickle. "All honors classes." "Yes, ma'am," Zoe replied politely, used to the subtle shock people showed when they realized she was both black and academically gifted, as if the two couldn't naturally go together. The hallways of Westlake were a maze of noise and movement. Lockers slammed, laughter echoed, and everywhere, students moved in tight-knit groups that had formed years ago. Zoe navigated through them like a ghost, invisible yet hyper-visible all at once. In first period AP Chemistry, she slid into an empty seat near the back, hoping to blend in. But when the teacher, Mr. Huang, introduced her to the class, 24 pairs of eyes turned to stare. "Miss Carter comes to us with a perfect GPA from her previous school," he announced, causing a ripple of whispers. A blonde girl in the front row turned to her friend, not bothering to lower her voice. "Great, another charity case to make the school look good on paper." Zoe's face burned, but she kept her expression neutral, chin up, just like her mother had taught her. This wasn't her first time hearing comments like that, and it wouldn't be the last. She was here to learn, to build her future, not to win popularity contests with girls who judged her before knowing a single thing about her. By lunchtime, Zoe had memorized her schedule, mapped the quickest routes between classes, and identified the safest places to sit, near teachers, away from the popular tables, close to exits. It was a survival skill she'd perfected over years of being the outsider. What she didn't know yet was how quickly that skill would be put to the test, or that the quiet girl who'd smiled at her in English class would soon become her only ally in a storm. By the end of her first week, Zoe had figured out the unwritten rules of Westlake High. The cafeteria had invisible boundaries, The bathroom near the gym was to be avoided at all costs, and one girl, Heather Sanders, was the unofficial queen of the entire school. Heather walked the hallways like she owned them, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, designer clothes that probably cost more than a month of Zoe's dad's salary, and a group of followers who laughed at everything she said. She didn't just have popularity, she had power. Teachers smiled nervously when she raised her hand, younger students flattened themselves against lockers when she passed, and even the principal seemed to soften his voice when speaking to her. "That's Heather," whispered Lily, the quiet girl from English class who'd started sitting with Zoe at lunch. "Her dad owns half the businesses in town, and her mom is on the school board. Last year, a teacher tried to fail her for cheating, and 2 weeks later, that teacher was transferred to another district." Zoe nodded, keeping her eyes on her sandwich. She'd met girls like Heather before. They existed at every school, just with different names and faces. The trick was to stay invisible to them. Flying under their radar was the safest bet. But invisibility became impossible on Monday morning when Mr. Huang announced the partners for the semester chemistry project. Zoe Carter and Tyler Reynolds, he called out, checking his list. A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. Zoe looked up, confused by the reaction, until she saw a tall boy with sandy brown hair raise his hand from the back row. Even she knew who Tyler was, the star quarterback whose picture was plastered all over the trophy case in the main hallway. What she didn't know was that Tyler was also Heather's boyfriend. "Mr. Huang." Heather's voice cut through the whispers, sharp as glass. "There must be a mistake. Tyler always works with me for projects." The teacher adjusted his glasses, unfazed by her tone. "There's no mistake, Miss Sanders. I've paired students based on complementary skills. Mr. Reynolds could benefit from working with someone who actually completed the pre-lab work." A few students snickered, quickly silenced by Heather's glare. Zoe sank lower in her seat, wishing she could disappear. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid. After class, Tyler caught up with her in the hallway. "Hey, partner," he said, surprisingly friendly. "Want to meet in the library after school to get started?" Before Zoe could answer, she felt the temperature in the hallway drop. Heather appeared beside them, hooking her arm possessively through Tyler's. "Look at you, making friends already," Heather said to Zoe, her smile not reaching her ice blue eyes. "How sweet. But Tyler has football practice after school, don't you, babe?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, coach canceled practice today. Something about field maintenance." Heather's smile tightened. "Well, then I'm sure you two won't mind if I join you. I could use some extra help with chemistry too." "It's just a project meeting," Zoe said quietly, meeting Heather's gaze despite the warning bells going off in her head. "Everything okay here?" Lily appeared at Zoe's side, her usually soft voice surprisingly firm. Heather looked Lily up and down with practiced disdain. "Just getting to know the new girl, since she'll be spending time with my boyfriend." The warning in her words was clear as day. Despite everything in her telling her to back down, Zoe straightened her shoulders. "I'll see you in the library at 3, Tyler. We should get started on the outline." She turned and walked away, Lily beside her, feeling Heather's stare burning into her back. "You know you just painted a target on yourself, right?" Lily whispered as they rounded the corner. Zoe sighed. "I'm not here to make trouble. I just want to do well in school." But both girls knew it wasn't that simple, not anymore. In the library that afternoon, Zoe and Tyler actually worked well together. He was smarter than his jock reputation suggested, and he seemed genuinely interested in the project, researching catalytic reactions in everyday products. What Zoe didn't realize was that Heather was watching from between the bookshelves, seething as she saw Tyler laugh at something Zoe said. When their project received the highest grade in class the following week, a perfect score compared to Heather's B-, the target on Zoe's back didn't just get bigger. The storm broke on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Zoe had started at Westlake High. The day had been unusually quiet. Even Heather had barely glanced her way during chemistry, which should have been Zoe's first warning sign. Predators were often most still right before they pounced. The final bell had rung 20 minutes ago, and most students had cleared out except for those in after-school activities. Zoe was at her locker, swapping out textbooks for homework, mentally planning the essay she needed to write for English class. The hallway was nearly empty, just a few stragglers heading to club meetings. "Hey, brain girl," came a voice that made Zoe's shoulders tense. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Taking a deep breath, Zoe continued organizing her backpack, pretending she hadn't heard. "I'm talking to you." Heather's voice was closer now. "Or are you too stuck up to answer?" Slowly, Zoe turned around. Heather wasn't alone. 4 girls flanked her like bodyguards, and a few steps behind them stood Tyler, looking uncomfortable. "I need to catch my bus," Zoe said simply, closing her locker. She'd learned long ago that the best response to bullies was calm indifference. React, and they know they've won. Funny thing, Heather stepped closer, blocking Zoe's path. "Tyler told me something interesting today. Said your chemistry project is being submitted for some state science competition. Said Mr. Huang thinks you two might even win." Zoe glanced at Tyler, who looked at the floor. "Mr. Huang suggested it, yeah? Here's what I don't get," Heather continued, her voice sweet but her eyes hard. "You show up out of nowhere from some public school on the other side of town, and suddenly you're the star student. Taking my boyfriend as your project partner? Getting special attention from all the teachers." Students who had been passing by slowed down, sensing drama. A small crowd was gathering, drawn by the rising tension. "I'm just trying to do well in school," Zoe said, trying to step around the group. Heather shoved her backpack, not hard enough to be obvious bullying, but enough to make Zoe stumble back against the lockers. "What I want to know is what makes you so special. Because from where I'm standing, you're nothing but a charity case they let in to fill some quota." The hallway had gone completely silent. Zoe felt her cheeks burn, not from embarrassment, but from a slow-building anger. She'd dealt with comments like this before, but something about Heather's entitled sneer made this time different. "Move, please," Zoe said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Or what?" Heather stepped closer. "You'll run crying to someone? Nobody cares about the new girl. Nobody wants you here. You don't belong at Westlake." "That's enough, Heather," Tyler finally spoke up, reaching for his girlfriend's arm. Heather shook him off, her face flushing with anger at his interference. In that moment of frustration, she reached out and knocked the books from Zoe's arms, sending them crashing to the floor. Papers scattered across the hallway tiles. The crowd gasped. This had crossed the line from verbal taunting to something physical. Zoe bent down to gather her things, keeping her face neutral even as her hands trembled slightly. She wouldn't give Heather the satisfaction of seeing her upset. That's when Heather made her biggest mistake. As Zoe knelt on the floor, Heather stepped forward and shoved her hard, sending Zoe sprawling. "Know your place," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, her voice dropping lower so only Zoe could hear, she added a racial slur that made several nearby students visibly flinch. A shocked silence fell over the hallway. Slowly, deliberately, Zoe picked herself up. She stood to her full height, looked Heather directly in the eyes, and spoke with a calm dignity that made even Heather take a step back. "I know exactly what my place is," Zoe said, "and it's right here, whether you like it or not." From somewhere in the gathered crowd, a phone lowered. A finger tapped "Stop recording." And neither girl realized. By dinner time, Zoe hadn't told her parents what happened. She'd walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the time alone to process the day. Her mom noticed her quietness but didn't push, just squeezed her shoulder as they set the table for dinner. "How was school today, kiddo?" her dad asked, passing the bowl of mashed potatoes. Zoe shrugged. "Fine, just busy with homework." She almost jumped when her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Asterisk, "Have you seen it yet?" Asterisk. Asterisk, "Seen what?" Asterisk, Zoe texted back. A link appeared in response. With a sinking feeling, Zoe excused herself from the table and hurried to her room. The video had already been viewed over 2,000 times. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation from the moment Heather approached her locker. The footage was shaky at first, but stabilized just in time to clearly capture Heather knocking Zoe's books down and shoving her to the floor. Though the racial slur was barely audible, the caption beneath the video spelled it out in shocked terms. Comments flooded in. Asterisk, "This is disgusting. Who does Heather think she is?" Asterisk. Asterisk, did she seriously push her like that? That's straight up assault asterisk. Asterisk, new girl handled it like a boss though asterisk. Asterisk, Principal Hudson needs to see this now asterisk. Zoe's hands trembled as she closed the app. Part of her felt validated. People had witnessed Heather's behavior and were calling it out, but another part felt exposed, vulnerable. She hadn't wanted to be the center of attention, hadn't wanted her struggles broadcast for everyone to see. Her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Messages from numbers she didn't recognize, from classmates she'd barely spoken to, all asking if she was okay, all saying they had her back. Downstairs, her father's phone rang. As police chief, calls in the evening weren't unusual, but something about this one made Zoe freeze when she heard his voice change from casual to professional in an instant. Yes, I understand. No, I wasn't aware. Send me the link immediately. Zoe sat on her bed, heart pounding. It was only a matter of time now. Her door opened without a knock. Her father stood there, phone in hand, face unreadable. Dad, Zoe began. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Before she could answer, her mother appeared behind him, concern etched across her face. Tell you what? What's happening? Chief Carter held up his phone. There's a video going around of our daughter being assaulted at school today, being called. He couldn't finish the sentence. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Zoe. It wasn't that bad, Zoe said quickly. I handled it. You shouldn't have had to handle it, her father replied, sitting beside her on the bed. This isn't your burden to carry alone. Outside, car doors slammed. Through her bedroom window, Zoe saw 2 police cruisers pulling up in front of their house. Dad, what did you do? She asked, panic rising. I didn't call them, he said, looking just as surprised. They must have recognized you in the video. Minutes later, their living room was filled with officers, all speaking in low, serious tones. The video had triggered immediate concern, not just because of what happened, but because it involved the police chief's daughter. What Heather had done wasn't just mean high school behavior, it was legally assault with elements of hate speech. We need to take you a statement, Miss Carter, Officer Patel said gently, if you feel up to it. As Zoe recounted the events, she noticed her father's expression shifting from concerned parent to focused professional. By the time she finished, he was fully in police chief mode. This stops now, he said, standing up. Not just for Zoe, but for any student who's been targeted by this kind of behavior. Throughout the evening, the video continued to spread. Parents called other parents. Teachers called administrators. By 10 o'clock, the school superintendent had issued an emergency statement promising a full investigation. At the Sanders household across town, Heather's phone wouldn't stop buzzing either. But unlike Zoe, no one was offering support. Friends who had stood behind her that afternoon were suddenly distant, not wanting to be associated with what was quickly becoming a town scandal. Heather's parents watched the video in stunned silence, their daughter's actions displayed on their large living room TV. For the first time, Heather saw real disappointment in her father's eyes. No amount of money or influence could erase what she had done. And when the doorbell rang just before 11, revealing 2 police officers on their doorstep, the reality of her actions finally hit home. This wasn't going away with a detention or a parent conference. This was something much. The next morning, Westlake High buzzed with nervous energy. Students gathered in tight clusters, phones out, replaying the video that had now reached over 50,000 views. The usual morning announcements were replaced by Principal Hudson's stern voice calling for an emergency assembly. Zoe almost didn't come to school. Her mother had offered to let her stay home, but something in her refused to hide. If I don't show up, it looks like I did something wrong, she'd said while tying her shoes with determined fingers. What she hadn't expected was the police cruiser in the school parking lot, her father's cruiser. Chief Carter had arrived early, dressed in his full uniform, his face set in the professional mask he wore when handling serious cases. Dad. Zoe hurried toward him as he stood talking with Principal Hudson near the front entrance. What are you doing here? Chief Carter turned to his daughter. His eyes softened briefly before returning to their official coolness. I'm here on police business, Zoe. Principal Hudson and I have called a meeting with the Sanders family at 9. But "This isn't just about you anymore," he said quietly. "What happened yesterday? What's on that video? It's about making sure every student in this school feels safe. It's my job to make sure of that." Principal Hudson, a tall man with graying hair who always seemed slightly overwhelmed, nodded nervously. "Your father is right, Zoe. We've asked the Sanders family to come in immediately. The school board is involved now too." Zoe felt her stomach knot. She had wanted Heather to face consequences, yes, but she hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. "I don't want to make this a huge deal." "It already is a huge deal," her father replied. "And not because you made it one, because what happened was wrong on multiple levels." As students filed past, many nodded at Zoe or offered small smiles of support. A few even stopped to tell her they had her back. It felt strange. Just yesterday, she'd been nearly invisible. Now, everyone knew her name. At exactly 9 o'clock, Zoe found herself sitting in the conference room next to Principal Hudson's office. Across the polished table sat Heather, looking smaller somehow without her usual confidence, and her parents, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit and a red-faced man who kept checking his watch. "This is completely unnecessary," Mr. Sanders began before anyone else could speak. "Teenage girls have disagreements all the time. Dragging the police into it is overkill." Chief Carter, standing at the head of the table, pulled out his phone. Without a word, he played the video. The sound of Heather's voice, the thud of books hitting the floor, the gasps from onlookers, it all seemed harsher in the quiet conference room. When it ended, he set the phone down. "Mr. Sanders, what you just witnessed wasn't a disagreement, it was assault. And the language used has elevated this to a potential hate crime investigation." Mrs. Sanders paled. "Hate crime? That's absurd. Heather would never." "It's all there on video, ma'am," Chief Carter said firmly. "And I'm not here as Zoe's father today. I'm here as the chief of police because my department takes these incidents very seriously." Principal Hudson cleared his throat. "Our school has a zero-tolerance policy for both physical violence and discriminatory behavior. The school board has reviewed the video and recommends immediate 2-week suspension for Heather, along with removal from student council and all extracurricular activities." 2 weeks? Mr. Sanders stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "This will go on her permanent record. What about college applications?" "Perhaps Heather should have considered those consequences before assaulting another student," Chief Carter replied calmly. For the first time, Heather spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to push her that hard." She couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "And the language you used?" Principal Hudson asked. Heather remained silent, a tear sliding down her cheek. Chief Carter turned to Zoe. "As the victim in this case, you have options. You can press formal charges, or we can handle this through alternative measures." All eyes turned to Zoe. The weight of the decision pressed on her shoulders. Part of her wanted Heather to face serious consequences, to understand how it felt to be humiliated and afraid. But another part remembered her mother's words. "How you respond to cruelty says more." "I don't want her arrested," Zoe said finally. "But I do want something good to come from this." Chief Carter nodded, a flash of pride in his eyes. "I have a proposal. Instead of making this a criminal case, I'd like to use this situation to address larger issues at Westlake High. I'm proposing a school-wide forum on respect and diversity with community leaders involved. And I think Heather should be part of organizing it." Mr. Sanders started to protest, but Heather cut him off. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll do whatever it takes." As the meeting continued, working out details and consequences, Zoe realized something had shifted in the room, and in the school beyond its walls. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, she didn't feel like an outsider fighting to be accepted. Instead, news of what happened in the conference room spread through Westlake High like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew that Heather had been suspended, that the police chief had been involved, and that something big was coming. A school-wide program that would address the issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Zoe sat with Lily in the cafeteria, trying to ignore the stares and whispers that followed her. "You're basically famous now," Lily said, pushing her pudding cup toward Zoe. "The girl who stood up to Heather Sanders and lived to tell the tale." Zoe shook her head. I never wanted any of this attention. Maybe not, Lily replied, but you've changed things. Did you know Tina from my math class finally reported the guys who've been making comments about her hijab? And that freshman who gets picked on for his stutter, he actually spoke up in class today. It's like everyone suddenly realized they don't have to take it anymore. A shadow fell across their table. Tyler stood there, lunch tray in hand, looking uncomfortable. Can I sit with you guys? Zoe hesitated, then nodded. Tyler hadn't defended her when it mattered, but he hadn't joined in Heather's cruelty either. I'm sorry, he said as soon as he sat down. I should have done more to stop her. I knew how she could be, but I never thought she'd go that far. Why did you date her? Lily asked bluntly. Tyler stared at his sandwich. We've been together since freshman year. It just kind of happened, and then it was easier to stay together than to break up. He looked at Zoe. I broke up with her last night, after I saw the video. Zoe wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of her wanted to tell him he was too late, that his silence had made him complicit. But another part recognized the courage it took to admit when you'd been wrong. What happens now? She asked instead. The forum is scheduled for next week, Tyler said. Your dad, Chief Carter, he's bringing in speakers from all over the county. The school board approved it yesterday. Meanwhile, across town, Heather sat at her family's kitchen table, staring at her laptop. Her mother had taken her phone as punishment, but she still had computer access for schoolwork. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages, some defending her, most condemning her, all talking about her. For the first time in her life, Heather understood what it felt like to be the subject of other people's judgment. Her chest felt tight with a feeling she rarely experienced, shame. Her father entered the kitchen, his face grim. He'd been on the phone all morning, damage control with business associates who'd seen the video. The Sanders name was now attached to a viral video of bullying and racism, not exactly the family reputation he'd worked to build. The community center called, he said, setting down a slip of paper. You start volunteer hours tomorrow. 3 days a week, 4 hours a day for the next month. Dad, that's like 50 hours. Heather protested. 52. And you're lucky that's all. Chief Carter could have pressed charges that would follow you for life. He sat down across from her. Do you understand how serious this is? Heather nodded, tears welling in her eyes. The center is in Pine Hills, he continued, naming the predominantly black neighborhood on the other side of town. You'll be helping with their after-school program. Heather felt her stomach drop. She'd never even been to that part of town. Her father had always told her to avoid it, saying it wasn't their kind of area. This isn't just punishment, her father said, his voice softer now. This is a chance for you to learn something. To be better than, he paused, better than I taught you to be. The next day at school, Principal Hudson called an assembly. The gymnasium was packed with students sitting in uncomfortable silence as he took the microphone. What happened this week has exposed problems that have existed at Westlake for too long, he began. We've always prided ourselves on being a top school, but excellence isn't just about test scores and trophies. It's about character. It's about how we treat each other. Chief Carter stood next to him, still in uniform. Next week's forum is just the beginning, he said when it was his turn to speak. My department will be working with the school to create a youth outreach program. We want to build bridges between communities that have stayed separate for too long. In the audience, Zoe watched her father with new respect. He wasn't just handling this as a police matter or as a parent protecting his child. He was using it as an opportunity. After the assembly, a girl Zoe had never spoken to approached her. I'm starting a student diversity alliance, she said nervously. We need someone to help lead it. Someone who isn't afraid to speak up. Would you be interested? Zoe looked around at the school that had felt so hostile just days ago. Something was shifting. Walls were coming down. Conversations were starting. Yes, she said.